Thanks for joining us today at the Mining News Network podcast. Let's get started.
All right, so you sent over some articles about these tariffs, President Trump's new tariffs on Canada and Mexico. And wow, this has deep dive written all over it, especially for silver. What's the story?
Well, let's see. Starting February 4th, 2025, there's a 25% tariff that's going to be hitting Canadian and Mexican imports. Originally, Chinese imports were part of this, too. They were going to be hit with a 10% tariff. But that seems to have fallen by the wayside. So the focus now is really on Canada and Mexico.
Okay, and I see there's a breaking update on all of this as well.
Yeah, so as of February 3rd, it looks like tariffs on Mexican imports are delayed by a month, just for negotiations. But the Canadian tariffs are still a go.
Oh, wow, so Canada's going it alone for now. I remember Prime Minister Trudeau saying there would be a response, something about a purposeful, forceful, but reasonable response. What could all of this mean for silver?
Well, it's significant because 80% of the silver used in U.S. bullion production, it comes from Mexico. So these tariffs could directly hit the prices of silver bars and rounds, the kind we're all used to seeing, not just specific coins like the Mexican Libertad.
So if someone was thinking about buying silver, would now be a good time to see what's out there before prices jump?
Yeah, that's definitely something to consider. This type of uncertainty usually leads to people wanting to buy more, especially when it comes to tangible assets like silver.
Now, the article specifically mentions the Mexican Libertad and the Canadian Maple Leaf, those two popular silver bullion coins, and it suggests that the tariffs could mean a $7.50 price jump per coin. Is it really that simple?
Well, a price jump is likely, but I doubt it'll be that simple across the board. Both mints have ways to try and soften the blow.
Okay, interesting. What kind of strategies are we talking about?
Well, they can adjust production. Like the Royal Canadian Mint, they can produce some maple leafs in the U.S.
Oh, interesting. What else?
They could look at other ways to distribute the coins, channels that could bypass the tariffs. They could also use existing inventory in the U.S. And of course, they'll be optimizing their supply chains to counter some of the costs.
Wow, so we might see a lot of maneuvering going on behind the scenes, just trying to keep those silver coins flowing.
Exactly. But we got to be realistic, even with those moves. The U.S. can't just rely on its own silver mines to meet the demand.
So why can't the U.S. just go it alone with silver?
Well, because U.S. mines only satisfy about 17% of national demand. They produce roughly 28 million ounces of silver each year. But demand is a lot higher. It's at 162 million ounces. So that means that 63% of U.S. silver consumption, it relies on imports, mostly from Mexico, Canada, Peru, and Chile.
So those tariffs really do complicate things. What about those other things that are impacted by the tariffs? I remember from the article from Mexico and Canada, there was lumber, some automotive parts, even oil, maybe at a lower rate, 10%. What are we looking at there?
Well, these broader tariffs, they could indirectly affect silver prices. You see, if the tariffs end up raising costs for businesses and consumers, that could lead to inflation and a weaker dollar.
And if the dollar weakens, wouldn't that actually be good for precious metals like silver?
Historically, yes. Investors tend to flock to them as a safe haven, when the economy looks a little uncertain.
So this whole tariff situation, it might actually push some investors towards silver.
Yeah, it's definitely possible. And you also have to think about the psychological impact. Like when people hear about trade wars and tariffs, it creates unease, makes people nervous. And that usually benefits safe haven assets, things like gold and silver.
So it really is a double-edged sword for silver investors then. Higher prices because the supply is limited, but at the same time, silver could gain value if the dollar weakens.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. It's a complex situation, a lot of different factors involved. And that's what makes this whole thing so interesting.
Absolutely. But for someone who's just starting to learn about silver, this might feel a little overwhelming. What are some of the main things they should keep in mind?
Well, if someone is thinking about buying silver, now might be a good time to do it. Existing inventory is still available, but prices could go up as the market adjusts to the tariffs.
That makes sense. What else? What else should people be watching for?
I'd say keep an eye out for buying opportunities. As mints and dealers adjust to this new landscape, this isn't like, the sky is falling situation. It's more of a reshuffling. And that could create some unique opportunities.
So it's not all doom and gloom. It's about being adaptable and seeing the potential.
Exactly. And another thing is be open to exploring other silver products. If the traditional sources become more expensive, we could see new products being offered or a shift in demand.
Don't put all your silver eggs in one basket.
Exactly. And also, keep an eye on the secondary market. It could become even more important for buying silver. As those supply chains adapt and new strategies emerge,
The whole landscape is changing.
it is. And while some price increases are unavoidable, the bullion industry is pretty good at adapting to challenges and finding creative solutions.
So there's reason to be, cautiously optimistic.
I think so. The main takeaway is that tariffs create volatility. And volatility, well, that can mean opportunity.
You've given us a lot to think about. This whole situation is fascinating. I mean, the impact of global trade, the ins and outs of the precious metals market.
It really shows how important it is to stay informed and adapt as things
It
change.
does. So to recap, tariffs mean uncertainty.
Right,
And uncertainty is always interesting when it comes to precious metals.
exactly. Uncertainty usually leads to those price swings, and that creates both risks and opportunities for investors.
The article mentioned that these tariffs could squeeze the silver market, and we've seen in recent years how everyday investors can really have an impact on the price of assets.
It's true. The big question is, could we see something similar happen with silver? Especially since it's historically been seen as a safe haven.
That's a really interesting thought. And what about the patriotic angle? Could we see a surge in demand for uncrooked silver eagles?
It's definitely possible. National pride and economic uncertainty, those have often driven demand for sovereign coins.
It'll be fascinating to see how this all plays out.
It will. It's a story that's still unfolding.
This deep dive has been so insightful. I'm definitely going to be following this silver situation more closely.
Well, I'm glad to hear that. Remember, knowledge is power. Especially in today's world, things are always changing.
Very well said. And to our listeners out there, we encourage you to do your own research and keep an eye on this story as it develops.
Yeah, it's definitely got me thinking, could we actually see like a silver squeeze 2.0? I mean, we've seen it before. What happens when people get excited about something? Especially when they think it'll become scarce,
Mm-hmm.
Or if there's a patriotic angle, well, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? Guess we'll have to wait and see. I mean, think about it. If enough people believe silver is about to get a lot harder to find, that belief alone, it could become a self-fulfilling prophecy.
So what should people actually do with this information? Like if you were advising someone interested in silver, what would you tell them?
Well, I definitely wouldn't give specific financial advice. That's not my area. But here's the thing, a few things to consider. First of all, don't rush into anything. Don't let hype or fear get the best of you. This situation is still developing. Things could change quickly.
So no need to run out and buy a ton of silver bars just yet.
Right, exactly. Second, do your own research. Don't just believe the headlines or what you see on social media. You got to understand how the silver market works, what these tariffs could really mean. And think about your own risk tolerance, too.
Solid advice. Knowledge is power, as they say.
It really is. And finally, just be prepared to adapt. This whole situation, it's dynamic. Things will probably change in ways we don't expect. So stay informed, be flexible, and be ready to adjust your strategy as you go.
You know what? This whole deep dive has been so informative. I feel like I understand this so much better now. The impacts of these tariffs, not just on the price of silver, but the whole market.
Well, it's been great talking about this with you. It's always fascinating, these complex issues, and how things that seem unrelated can impact the global economy.
Absolutely. And to our listener, we hope you found this deep dive as insightful as we did. The world of finance, it never stops changing, right? So stay curious, stay informed, and happy investing.
Thank you for listening to the Mining News Network. If you found this content helpful, please don't forget to drop us a like and subscribe. If there are topics or companies that you would be interested in or like us to cover next, please leave a comment down below.